Good morning. Good morning and welcome to our second in the series of the July series of Our Changing World. And we have what I believe to be a very thoughtful and hopefully thought-provoking and also action-provoking presentation today. And you received through your emails a basic invitation to what it is, and in a little bit we'll have a little bit more of an introduction. As we prepare ourselves, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that there is a place for us to gather, not only a building, but shoulders that rub each other, hands that shake, people that hug, and also hands that support in times of need, whatever it might be. And so, Lord, in the blessing of this place, in this space, and these people, I pray that your Spirit move and that, again, you open our minds to broader thinking, that you open our arms to wider embrace, and that your Spirit open the mouth to speak that will share to us today. We pray this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord, who healed, who called, and who saved. Amen.
What would you do if your house was on fire? You'd probably call 911. But what if calling the fire department wasn't cool? What if calling for help wasn't safe? What if calling for help means that you'd get judged? For people with mental health challenges, that's exactly what it's like. And this is because of stigma. We end up having to have secret identities, keeping our pain to ourselves, because we feel like asking for help will put us at risk. How did this happen? Where did mental health stigma come from? Here's my theory. Back in the day, I mean way back in the day, back in the caveman times, people didn't understand a lot of things, including fire. I think the same is true with our minds and our mental health, but for mental health, the ignorance has persisted. People used to think that if you had a mental health issue, you were possessed by demons or the devil. So if you were feeling sad and depressed, or experiencing mood swings, or feeling anxious, or having any other mental challenge, it was best to keep it to yourself under lock and key. Because if people found out, you could get shunned from society. Or worse, they might try to exorcise you to drive the devil out. And if that didn't work, it could cost you your life. But you most certainly wouldn't have gotten the help and support that you needed. How did we learn to treat each other so inhumanely? Fear of demons. Blaming the victim, saying that it was their karma. So in order for anyone to be accepted by society, we all learned how to lie, to say I'm fine, to put up a front, to pretend that we're good even if we're not feeling good. But here's the good news, we don't have to live like we're living in the past anymore. We've learned a lot about psychology, about how the mind works, and we know that there are many factors that can affect someone's mental health. It's not the devil, it's not karma. Our mental health is impacted by our environment and by our life experiences. Genetic factors also play a role as well. I want us to be able to call for the help that we need, so that we don't have to deal with our houses burning down alone. It's time to finally end the stigma, because now we know better. And if you feel like your house is on fire, here are some things that you can do. Talk to somebody you trust. And if you're that lucky friend that someone is confiding in, be cool. Know that you're not expected to solve anyone's problems, but allowing that person to be honest helps. There are many support lines available like Kids Help Phone, and also distress centers for adults. The purpose of this video isn't to tell you how to deal with your mental health. I just want to say that help is available, and we don't have to hide anymore. A burning house is a major challenge that humans learn to solve with teamwork, and I know we can do the same with our mental health. It's time to be supportive. It's time to be brave. Let's help each other out. Thank you.
For those of you that read the Mennonite or receive the Mennonite, you will have noticed the last, which is the publication of Mennonite Church USA. You will realize that the last July edition has to do with mental health and parishioners reflecting on it, and several helps in there, and even a study, if you look in your bulletins, a call for a study for genetic bipolar study from the National Institute of Health, all things that we can take part in. And what I thought I'd do as we set up Maddie's presentation is share a little bit from the editorial, which builds on the video, and I think sets the frame for us today. Gordon Hauser writes, "Jesus healed. You can't read the gospel and escape the reality. Not only that, he encouraged his disciples to heal, and sometimes it worked, and many times it didn't." And he has biblical quotes there for where it worked and when it didn't. Today we generally look to professionals, to medical doctors, to psychiatrists, to others, to bring healing for ourselves or to others. They are certainly helpful and often necessary, but we are finding that healing is often more complex than one simple care or one simple cure. It takes a village, a community, to heal a person. And then he goes on a little bit, and then I skip down, he says, "And when we read these healing stories in the gospel, one striking element, listen to this, one striking element is that by healing people, Jesus not only heals them of their sickness, but more often than not, what's highlighted is the restoration back into community. Think about it," he says. "Those with leprosy, the hemorrhaging woman, the blind man, others were considered impure. They were pushed to the margins. They were ostracized from their community. But once healed, they were often able to rejoin their community and find shalom, wholeness." Now, we might look down on that sort of ostracism or marginalization, he writes, yet we practice it today in many ways. As 3 of the articles in this issue, and the issue that's also in our bulletin or online, attest, members of our church communities often feel ostracized, afraid to be honest about their struggles with depression, bipolar disorder, or other mental illnesses. We need not to pretend that we can cure people with mental illness and even help find permanent care or assistance. But we can provide a loving community that welcomes one another no matter what we struggle with in our lives. Do we seek healing and freedom from oppression for those among us and around us? Will we embrace those who courageously confess their struggles? Will we confess our own struggles? What a calling. Luis, introduce our guest for this morning and welcome here.
It's my pleasure to introduce Madi Ward. She will be a senior at Buhler High School this coming year. She was a junior last year. And those of you that got the email, you know that she is a state qualifier who took 4th this year in state debate. And in forensics, it said that she's a 3-time running state qualifier. What she said is that every time that she performed, she was a state qualifier, and you had to, what was it, how many? You have to place 1st or 2nd in order to qualify. So, and then she is a 2-time national qualifier. And just last month, she was in Sacramento, and she placed 33rd in the national. She missed by 1 point going to the finals, where she would have had to do a stage presentation in front of many people. So we're so glad to have her here with us. Some of you know Jack Mace, and he actually discovered her for NAMI. He was substitute teaching, and she was there, and she said, "I'd like you to see this paper that I wrote," and he said, "Okay, you're coming to NAMI." And then when we saw her, I said, "Oh, can you come to Buhler Mennonite Church?" So we're glad to have her. And she does need to go to work really quickly after she leaves here. So we're going to have questions and answers after she finishes her presentation, and so ask her those questions then, and cookie social afterwards. So if you help me, welcome Madi. Thank you.
Good morning. Alrighty. Close your eyes. There will be bad days. But remember how no one died in the wars that we fought. And if you keep your eye on depression and then back away slowly, spacing yourself further and further, but all the while watching the depression shrink in the growing distance. It's if that precise moment when that tiny speck vanishes, your periphery will catch hands reaching up behind you to cover your eyes, and you'll hear a small voice whisper, "Guess who?" I had a way with monsters. As a child, I slept in a bedroom full of them, a closet stuffed with long-legged demons who could make it from one end of the room to the other in a single step. My strep throat silence was born from night terrors. Post-traumatic stress disorder is an extreme response to a severe stressor. Now, these traumatic events are often recalled in nightmares, and my thoughts were kept in closets hanging next to skeletons. Prolonged periods of sadness with the inability to enjoy life. And I killed a man in cold blood tonight. Suicide is the taking of one's life. Every 20 minutes in the United States, someone succeeds in killing themselves, and it's estimated that between 240,000 and 600,000 people a year will attempt to die. No, I killed a shape-shifting monster tonight trying to protect all of the people who don't understand things like that exist in our world. 57.7 million people in this world have been diagnosed with a mental illness. Now, mental illness isn't beautiful. It's tragic. Pop culture today is taking the beauty away from these monsters and turning them into what they really are, even if it means turning them into zombies, dementors, demons, and even shapeshifters. They represent a world of illnesses that we struggle to cope with on a daily basis. And J.K. Rowling shocked the world when she admitted in an interview that she wrote dementors to help handle her depression. And trust me, it's not always as simple as eating a piece of chocolate, even though we all wish it was. We have coping mechanisms, including pop culture, and I present a program entitled Coping Monsterism, featuring pieces from Shane Koyczan, Alex Irvine, Davison Neale, Verna Hildebrand, and Jory Baker. You can survive the stigma. Skinwalkers, they don't change into a wolf or a monster or anything non-human for that fact. It kills people and assumes their shape, and the only way to recognize them is their eyes give off a strange luminescence. So flash like the blade we hold to those who would have us believe we were alone. We have never been alone. Multiple personality disorder is seen in children but rarely diagnosed until adulthood. And between 1890 and 1920, only 77 cases were found. It wasn't even until the 1970s we considered it an illness. But somehow we've overcome. Somehow we've pushed on, and somehow we've gone the distance, and in going there, we possess the freedom to map the uncharted lands of any and everywhere. But my Ellie's deterioration came suddenly and without warning. One day she was mostly normal, and the next her breathing became really shallow. Depression is a state marked by feelings of worthlessness, guilt, loss of sleep, and my Ellie stopped sleeping, she stopped eating, she lost all of her energy, and I knew it was time. These are the dark places where we, against all likelihood, must shine, just to make sure we're doing everything we possibly can. And Ellie, well, she's still in stage 1. That's good. It means there's still time. She'll start to forget things, followed by a general disinterest in things she once enjoyed. And when she starts showing signs of aggression, well, that's when you need to let me go, so I don't slip up and say something like the only person to let me down more than God is you. See, I didn't mean to, but somewhere along the way, I grew a mouth like a cannon. So the next time you run in and out of my secret lives, I'll have some knives of my own I can throw, and I know my aim is getting better, because I can finally say your name in a prayer, multiple personality disorder, is two or more personalities trapped within the same individual created by a tragic event. And I am a museum of despair. At times I wish amnesia would descend upon me like a cold or other common sickness. Wish I could bid farewell to my memory. A night terror differs from a nightmare, and that when the dreamer awakes, they'll take the terror back with them into consciousness. Add to the fact that the dreamer rarely recalls what they have dreamt, and any attempt to wake them ends unsuccessfully every single time. Tulpas. They're pure, simple, and created by the act of someone simply imagining it. But this process goes a little too far. So we took chances. But then they're death omens, spirits that appear to warn people of their upcoming doom. And some are quiet. They reach out to the person with whom they share the closest emotional relationship with. But sometimes they appear to warn people, to warn them that we're here and we're not going anywhere. Ellie had some good days, but a lot of bad days too. And when you're having things like night terrors, sometimes we end up believing in our monsters. Sometimes they take up residence under our beds and fill our head with a dread. We dread our own fear because somehow we thought it was better off being kept a secret. It should come as no surprise that some hearts are like dark bedrooms, tombs we've allowed ourselves to shut because that way everything would be all right. But we were the oddities juggling depression, loneliness, playing solitaire, spin the bottle, trying to kiss the wounded parts of ourselves and heal. But I'm all right. I'm okay. I rehearse handshakes with titans for those rare occasions when even you giants need someone to look up to, and he is a stick of TNT lit from both ends. Could describe to you in detail the way the sky bends and the moments before it's about to fall. Being broken just happens to be a process, first leading you to believe that you are unbreakable, and in that moment that you accept it as true, and that moment that you believe you were indeed descended from diamonds, well, it is then you begin to notice you have been crumbling this entire time. And despite an army of friends who will call me an inspiration, I remain a conversation piece between teachers who can understand that sometimes my becoming drug-free has less to do with an addiction and more to do with my sanity. Okay.
It's obvious that you've done a lot of reading and research about mental illness, and I really appreciate your presentation, and your thoughts are extremely stimulating. And one of the things that I was thinking of when you were talking that stuck in my mind is the that suicide happens every 20 minutes.
Yes.
And I was wondering, I sort of see suicide as sort of the extreme symptom of a mental disorder. And I was wondering if you had some information in your research that could verify that.
Yeah, a lot of medications, especially antidepressants, they'll list suicidal thoughts as one of the side effects from taking these pills like Zoloft and Xanax, things such as that. That's the first warning they give you. Suicidal thoughts occur in 1 in every 3 teens at any given point in time. 4 out of 5 people will attempt to take their lives at some point in their lifetime. 1 in 5 are successful. That's every 20 minutes someone succeeds in killing themselves, which means it happens more often than we think, and it happens behind closed doors. At times, especially students don't realize that when someone misses a week of school, it's not always because of the stomach flu. But it's taboo to talk about, so we don't.
I could just sit here and talk to you all day. You bring up the subject of teens and
Yes.
suicide, and I want to put a punchline in for a program on September 4th at Buhler High School. And this program is a drama on laughter is a sacred space, but it has to do with suicide. And it's particularly targeted for teens and parents of teens. And so I want to put a punchline in for that program for everybody to go, because I think it could be a very valuable experience for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Hannah Neufeld, and for someone like me who has not experienced really anything you're talking about personally, it's kind of shocking. I'm sitting here shocked. What do you say to someone like me for my next step? Like, I'm sure if I heard this again a second time, I'd think differently about it. And I'm not saying I think bad or good. I'm just saying how my reaction right now is to think that people live, you know, with those kind of thoughts constantly is shocking. And I guess I knew that, but when you talk about it this way, it brings it closer to me. What are the steps for someone who doesn't deal with this, who has no understanding of, you know, hearing things, feeling things that you're talking about?
I started with taking a psychology class this past year at the high school. I knew that I was affected to a degree, but we didn't talk about it. So I have what they call high-functioning depression, so no one realizes that I have it. I do a really good job at hiding it, and we don't acknowledge its existence half the time. I go to therapy. I'm on a list of medications to help with it, and people don't realize because we put on such a good mask that it's really a shock. So I would say doing a little bit of research on your own, finding out like just the basics on mental illness, a lot of the common ones, high-functioning depression, anxiety. Your next-door neighbor could be living with PTSD. 60% of people who have been diagnosed with PTSD have experienced childhood trauma of some sort, a car accident, abuse by parents, abuse by a family member. And so because of the stigma on mental illness, everything's kept really quiet. Acknowledging that there is a stigma and working to get rid of it by being more open and talking about it in everyday conversation, that's really the first step into changing everyone's perspective. Yes.
You mentioned that multiple personalities, sometimes in children where it does exist, is not even diagnosed till later on. And I'm just wondering also about how many of your peers that you recognize have some sort of problem. You said that a lot of people mask it, but I also substitute in school like Jack, and I see lots in many grade levels with issues. Is this true? I mean, or can you make a guess as to how many people that you know who also have problems probably not addressed or hidden?
Yeah, so when it comes to multiple personality disorder, they don't diagnose children because children tend to have imaginary friends. And so they don't know the difference between an imaginary friend and having a split personality. Now we call it dissociative disorder, identity disorder. So they can't distinguish the differences between two different people. There's a movie, Sybil, that you can watch that'll explain it better. The people I surround myself with all happen to be debate and forensics kids. I don't really fit in with anyone else, and that's really apparent to a lot of people who know me. My team, the debate and forensics kids that I perform with, a lot of us deal with a disorder of some sort. And so for us, we talk about it a little bit more because it's been brought to the surface. I would say debate and forensics is more of a safe haven for kids. A lot of our students have been kicked out of their house at one point in time, have been hospitalized at one point in time for attempting to commit suicide. And so my group is a little more close-knit than I would say a lot of other students. I'm not sure about the population as a whole in my school, but I do know that our team of 40 kids has all experienced something similar.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Living in a home with a daughter who struggles with depression and has done the attempted suicide. At what point, you said it was a stigma and it wasn't easy for you to talk about with your parents. In our home, I mean, we all know it and we want to talk about it and we're there to talk about it, but is it you that holds back from talking about it? You mentioned the stigma, and I'm aware of society stigma. But did you have stigma in your home, or what held you back from being able to talk to your parents or a trusted adult? And was it forensics that broke this loose for you? You say you're high functioning, so, and you have peers that struggle with this, so that gives you commonality. But at what point is the stigma within you, not the people around you?
That's a really good question. I'm more open to talking about it with my mom, who's sitting up here, than to talking to my stepdad about it. Because when my mom and I got diagnosed close to the same time, within 2 months of each other, and my dad would look at us and he'd be like, well, stop being sad. Stop worrying. So for him, mental illness doesn't exist. And I think he's part of the stigma that goes on in our household. Because I can sit down and talk to my mom for 3 hours about it, but with him, it's just, oh, well, today's a rough day, so I'm going to go sit in my room and we're just not going to talk about it. That's more for his comfort levels and mine both. To a degree, I realized that I was struggling with something, but I wasn't open about it until my freshman year. I had a debate and forensics coach my freshman and sophomore year by the name of Andrew Bauer, and he pulled me aside and he's like, well, I really want you to give a speech about high-functioning depression and about the stigma on depression. And he's like, I think it'll benefit you to do some research. So he sat down with me and we did hours of research. It was a 6-hour practice night right before state. And it really opened my eyes because he had caught on long before I had, but being an acting coach and being a debate and forensics coach, you tend to notice that there's not so much of a mask when kids choose certain pieces. My freshman year, I chose a lot of pieces that stood out to people who feel like they have nothing. There's a forensics piece out there called 368 Friends. It's about a girl on social media, and she has 368 friends on social media, but when in reality, she feels like she has none. And so at the end of the piece, she swallows a bottle of pills, and that's the end. So little things like that really stood out to him and really started the conversation, which ended up getting me help 2 years later. My sophomore year, he was there all the time, still asking me questions. I was still performing the same pieces or the same genre of pieces. And so the stigma is in a lot of people. I think it starts in teens who don't want to think there's something wrong because we'll get shut out by our peers. I got lucky in the sense that when it comes to debate and forensics, everyone is generally open, and we all write pieces together, cut pieces together. And so for us, the conversation is already started, it's just making it vocal. My advice is, even though there is a stigma, and though it's hard to talk about, start with watching a few movies that have a character who suffers from a disorder of some sort. The movie Sybil is a really good example to watch, a girl who has multiple personality disorder, and you meet 17 different personalities at one point in time. And so that stands out to people that multiple personality disorder does exist. Watching a movie with a character who has really bad anxiety will open up the conversation for people who just think they're nervous all the time. Pop culture is definitely the way to start. They recommend zombie movies for people with eating disorders. It's the things like that. Harry Potter, because Dementors represent depression. So while people don't realize that these monsters that we watch on TV represent illnesses, it makes the conversation easier to have.
Have you seen Fried Green Tomatoes?
I'm sorry, what?
Have you seen the movie Fried Green Tomatoes?
Yes.
And Benny and June?
Yeah.
Benny and June's a good one as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
What I'm wondering is, we can remove the stigma from our family, but how do you do it in the public? In, you know, how do you get that support and remove that?
I started going to NAMI last month because they made the conversation easier to have. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, the stigma is going to be there for a while, and we all know, but we don't want to talk about the stigma like staying. The problem is it's really hard to change everyone's minds, but by changing minds of your peer group and by your family, with them, it's easier to branch out. So I changed my brother's mind on his perspective of mental illness, and so now my brother talks to his friends about it. And so if you start with one person, that one person goes to another, and it creates a butterfly effect, so to speak. So one decision here can change the world over there. And so it's rough, and I have a long way to go with opening up about it. But having a debate and forensics community in Buhler, and all of us go out and perform just one performance to a church or to another school or to even a group of friends, it opens up the conversation. And by having a conversation with one person, they can have this conversation with 10, and from 10 it'll go to 100, and from there it just keeps building, and eventually the stigma will be gone.
That's my goal, is to have it gone. To me, it's like brain cancer would be more acceptable, and that's sad. And I just don't know. I want to do whatever I can to help.
I just asked the lady, I was like, can I give you a hug? And I mean, that was a little different. She was grieving. But sometimes just reaching out and saying, are you okay? Can I give you a hug? Do you need anything? Offering them a quiet place to sit, or helping them move away from the crowd. There's a lot of different things you can do to help relieve somebody's anxiety. Sometimes just knowing they're not alone is one of the best and biggest things that you can do.
I came home from California a month ago. I was out competing. I was gone for a little over a week. And my first week back, a friend of mine called me, and he was having a rough night. He suffers from bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety. He's got a lot on his plate. And we were sitting on the couch at 11, and he called me, and I was on the phone with him till 7 o'clock the next morning. He needed someone to be on the phone with him all night. His parents weren't home, and he lives 3.5 hours away. We met at a forensics tournament, funny enough. But staying with him all through the night and just letting him know that he wasn't alone opened up a lot of doors for him, because then he was able to talk to his dad about it. While he had been going to therapy, and while they knew that there were problems to be discussed, it was someone who's still practically a stranger staying up with you all night to make sure you're okay makes it easier for you to talk to other people and let them know that you're not.
Watch for subtle changes in your neighbors, your family, anybody that you observe on a regular basis, maybe a coworker. If you notice they look sad, if you notice that they're dressing differently, they don't do their hair or their makeup the same, maybe you don't see your elderly neighbor going out to get their mail. Knock on the door, ask if you can help them with something, and if they see you as a trusted person, they might open up to you and let you know that they need help that goes beyond mowing the yard or picking up the paper or something. So just be aware of the people that surround you. Like with her, I noticed changes. She didn't want people to come over. She didn't go to the park with her friends. She didn't come out of her room. Her taste in music changed. The things she watched on TV changed. Those are all really important things, especially in teenagers, that you need to watch.
Dramatic changes in appearance. Cutting off your hair if it is at your belly button and then cutting it off to your shoulders, that was a big sign. I I did that. Dyeing your hair, something completely different. The giving away of personal items. So a necklace that means a lot to you, a favorite band shirt, your instrument, things such as that. Those are definitely big signs because they're getting ready to make the process easier of things getting removed from the home after they die.
You mentioned that your stepfather just says, well, just get happy or just get over it. You all know that my husband is bipolar, and he had a really severe case of anxiety a couple years ago, and he has a job he in life support, so he has a very stressful job, and he would be crying for about an hour before he had to go to work because he didn't think he could make it to work, and so usually he did, and so when he would go to his therapist basically would say everything's okay because you're making it to work. And some mornings he couldn't. He would come in and he says, I can't make it. And I said, well, once you get to work, are you okay? And he says, well, usually. And I said, well, if I take you, will that help? And so many times I would take him, and he would go. And I just didn't know what to do about it, and his therapist wasn't helping, so what he did was take an overdose of medication. But he's a very intelligent man, and he took an overdose that was enough that someone would wake up and help him, but not enough to kill himself. Do you think that a lot of the suicides are for that?
There have been studies that show women are more likely to do things like cut themselves and to overdose on medications because we still have the damsel in distress peace of mind. So someone will come in and rescue us and save us. And for some people, the only way they know how to reach out for help is to do something that we would consider an attempt or harmful to themselves because they want to get help, but everyone around them, while they're trying to help, may not help in the way that they need. It took a lot for a lot of people to open up about it. I think that it was more of an outcry and a reach, but not, he didn't want everything to end. There was a reporter who interviewed 47 people who lived from jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And all 47 people admitted that on their way down, they realized that some of the problems that we face can, if not easily be solved, can be solved in general. And so for some people, it just opens up their eyes to do that and to take that step.
Well, he kind of brought it home to me. You all know that I battled a long-term illness a couple years ago and had quite a time with it. And my boss had told me, you know, I was feeling really bad, and he said, well, stay home as long as you need to. And I stayed home for a day, and the second day, Jim came to me and he said, don't you think you should go to work today? And I said, well, no, I'm still not feeling good. I said, you know, I still feel like I could throw up. I still, you know, I'm having problems. I don't think I'm going to go today. And my boss said I could stay home. He says, well, I think you should go. I said, I think you should just get up and go to work. And it hurt my feelings, and I cried about it. And later I went and asked him, I said, why did you tell me that I needed to go to work today? And he said, because that's what you say to me. Can we just get there? Can we get you to work today? And that really brought it home to me, that even I, who live with it, and I have many friends that have mental illnesses and everything too, even I was not approaching it right.
Yeah, and sometimes you believe you're approaching it right, and then it gets a little bit harder because you get so ingrained in the process that it's repetitive, so every morning when you get up, it's the same thing over and over again. My grandpa wakes up at like 7 o'clock every morning. Doesn't matter what time he goes to bed, it's just natural for him to get up at that time. He doesn't need to set an alarm anymore. And that's how we get with a lot of things. For some of us, it's taking the medication on time, or every other Thursday we make an appointment with our therapist and we go every Thursday around the same time. Whether or not it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 8 o'clock in the morning, it just becomes a process. And it gets a little bit better if you change up the process every so often. So instead of just saying every morning, well, can we get you to work, it's what can we do that will like help you get to work, or little tricks. I count all the time. 1, 2, 3, 4. I tap my fingers. My mom will notice me counting in the kitchen. I count during tests. Sometimes it's for a minute and sometimes it's for 20. just little things that help slow my breathing, that help me focus. And so starting little things like that, for a long time I carried a stress ball in my bag, and some of my teachers would be like, well, put that away, it's a toy, but it just helps me breathe. It's rhythmic, and it's almost like having your pulse. It's the same process, same beat every time, and it just slows everything down.
You know, there's a a lot of differences, and you know, a person with a mental illness can have all kinds of different kinds of personalities. And one of the things that in our family we found is that our loved one doesn't really want to talk about mental illness, doesn't want to talk about it at all. All he wants to do is know that he has friends, know that he has people he can talk to that will talk about everything else except his mental illness. And in fact, he's a very intelligent fella, and the interesting thing is he doesn't want to educate himself about his illness. So there is a wide variation in what people with this kind of disorder, how they behave. But one of the things that I've read a lot about and that NAMI has promoted is over the years is that it is important to be part of a faith group. And it's not a matter of whether the faith group, you know, is, you know, trying to convert you into something that you're not ready to be, but to have that caring community, I think, is what is important. And studies have shown that folks who are part of a faith tend to do better. And so I think it behooves those of us who have our own faith that we need to make efforts to include people who maybe, you know, just need to have somebody to talk to, period. Maybe not about their illness, but just anything.
Communication is a big thing. A lot of people, they struggle to talk about mental illness because for them, talking about it makes it a lot more real. So when you have to sit down and have that conversation, you have to admit to yourself that you haven't and that it's okay. And some people, it's breaking that barrier, because once you accept it as true, once you accept the fact that this is something that you're going to live with and that's something you need to work with, it gets a little bit easier. But talking about mental illness is taboo. If I talk about it to any of my classmates, they look at me funny. But if I talk about it to debate and forensic students, they understand because it hits home a little more. Being part of a close-knit group, I would say, has definitely helped me. There are support groups. There's always having faith. Even if it's just 3 or 4 friends who understand exactly what you're going through, but it's easier not to talk about some days, then it's easier not to talk about some days. You can admit to yourself that you're having a bad day. You can admit to your friends that you're having a bad day. I'll warn some of my teachers, especially some that I've grown extremely close with. I'm like, okay, this is not a good day for me. I'm probably not going to talk in class. I'm just going to kind of sit back. I'll take my notes. I'll go with the flow, but it's just one of them that I just can't function in today. And it's having that conversation sometimes, or not talking about it, but understanding that it's there and keeping a journal. That's what my therapist recommended. She said, write it down. Every time that you feel sad, write it down. There are psychiatrists and therapists who will recommend, well, every time you have a happy thought, write it down. Because the more you focus on the good, the less you see the bad. And that helps people with depression to see that sometimes, even if it's the littlest thing, like your friend smiling at you in the hallway, sometimes it makes you feel better, and sometimes it's easier to continue.
We have an 8th grade daughter, and it's interesting to hear from her about kids that are her age and even younger, that she has seen cutting, some hide it, and then some are just very open with it. And for someone who's that age, how do you put that on their level to explain to them and how to be there for someone that they know is doing that? And how does that fit into the realm of type of mental illness, or does it even?
A lot of the younger kids who go to that have had some sort of family problem at home. It's controlling their own pain. Other people have hurt them so bad that the only way to feel something is if you do it to yourself, because you're so used to the feeling of being hurt, but being hurt by others definitely feels a lot different than being hurt by yourself. And honestly, it deals with, a lot of girls struggle with body issues and confidence, and so they do that because they're inflicting that on themselves versus girls being rude in the locker room and telling them that they're overweight or that they're too short or that they're too tall and things such as that. Cutting is one of the first things that you'll notice for people who have depression and anxiety. It starts with that, and then it blooms into something else because then they feel like they can't live without it. People who suffer from eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, will also inflict pain on themselves, but they inflict it by taking baking soda to get sick after a meal and other things such as that. You'll notice that some kids have random bruises on their arms or on their upper thigh, and a lot of them are doing it to themselves because it's the only way they can feel something. A lot of those students don't, especially being in that age group, don't understand that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It may take a while to find it, but there's a light. There's always a silver lining to the gray skies. I was a bubbly kid up until about 4th or 5th grade when the way you looked started to matter. I mean, I was fine with who I was. I had a lot of friends and everything was going great. And then when people started to notice, oh, well, you're starting to get acne, or hey, your hair's a different color, or your skin's a different color, that's when everything starts to take a toll. And sometimes it doesn't get better until the end of your high school career, because by the end of high school, you're so used to everyone's comments that you don't let them faze you anymore. I didn't start talking to people and I didn't start having friends again until my freshman year. I went through 5-6 years of, I really didn't communicate with anyone. I had 1 or 2 friends that were outcasts, that were oddballs just like me. And so it starts with sitting down and talking to a person like, hey, I see that you're hiding it and it's okay, or I see that like you're open about it and that happens, but let's sit down and talk about it. Why do you do it? Well, if you don't want to talk about why you do it, can you tell me like what's going on at home? And that's usually the biggest kicker, is that so many things happen at home and behind closed doors, and we don't talk about it. And that's part of like dealing with mental illness, is understanding the stressors that cause it, that make the mental illness worse. For me, it's not seeing my biological dad. My birthday will be 4 years that I have not had communication with this man. I mean, I saw him on a regular basis until I was like 9 or 10. For me, that was a severe stressor. It's still a stressor, but it's just having the conversation with people.
Okay, it's been a serious time, so let's all thank Madi for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, Cookie Social. For those of you who are not regular attendees here, you're invited to come to the basement for some cookies and coffee and conversation. And Madi will be here for just shortly, maybe you have to take off now already, but thank you so much for being real. I mean, as Hannah too, the stark images of daily life drawn from even Harry Potter, and wishing that just a piece of chocolate could wish it away, but it isn't always the case. And I leave you again with that challenge that Gordon Hauser had. Do we seek healing and freedom from oppression for those among us and around us? Will we embrace those who courageously confess their struggles? Will we confess our own? Go in peace. Christ is here.